Hello everyone, this is Vikram and welcome to my channel. Today we are going to look at how to use ChatGPT, which is an AI chatbot developed by OpenAI to solve some of our DevOps related problems. To be specific, these are not DevOps problems. So I started asking AI chatbot some of the common DevOps tasks which I usually do, and it has given me some responses. So let's analyze whether these responses are correct or not. So I started exploring this tool sometime last week by asking it some of the common DevOps questions, and to my surprise, it answered all of them with almost 100% accuracy. And I tested this tool on many questions like questions on Docker, Dockerfile, Dockerizing applications, Kubernetes manifest file, Helm charts, Nexus repository, and I also asked it to write some APIs in Python and GoLang, and some security related topics on Docker, Jenkins pipeline. And in all these above cases, it has given me accurate information. Now let's see how ChatGPT can be used for some of the DevOps tasks, and we'll see this in action. This ChatGPT stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer. It's, as we discussed, it is an AI chatbot model developed by OpenAI in November last year, and it is built upon OpenAI's GPT-3i platform. This is fine-tuned with both supervised and reinforced learning techniques, so where the models were asked questions and their responses were analyzed, and the models were rewarded based on the responses that they give. So this is how they train it, using both supervised and reinforced learning. And also OpenAI gathers data from all the ChatGPT users time to time, so that is further used to train and fine-tune ChatGPT responses. And it also gives very detailed responses, so you'll be surprised by the amount of detail that ChatGPT gives the responses in. These responses, it responds across many domains, and these are derived from very large data volumes from both the internet and any other public resources. So basically checks everywhere and gives accurate answers. We can use it to write essays, programs, compose music and emails, write Jenkins pipelines. So basically you can do anything with this AI chatbot. And one important thing is it also remembers our previous conversations. This particular ChatGPT model was trained using text databases from internet, and this included a hoofing 570 GB of data obtained from various textbooks, ebooks, web text, Wikipedia, and various articles that are written all over the internet. And to be more specific, so more than 300 billion words were fed into the system to basically train it. And this service is initially launched for free to the public, but the OpenAI has plans to monetize this service later. Has already over 3 million users. That's the reason why even if you try to access ChatGPT, you will face downtime time to time. We'll see whether we can access it now. And this is how the chatbot looks like. So once you log in, so you can start typing in this chat box, in this dialog box, and it starts responding. So what we did is we tested this chat box for various commands and various things across all these DevOps tools. Like we asked it some of the Linux commands, asked it to write shell script, some APIs using Go and Python, and then things related to Maven and Tomcat, Docker, Dockerization, Kubernetes and Helm charts, Jenkins pipelines, Ansible playbooks, Terraform and AWS, Nexus repository. So basically whatever we cover in our DevOps training, so we try to ask it all these questions, and to my surprise, it answered everything with 100% accuracy. Now let's see everything in action. So this is OpenAI website. So it is openai.com/blog by ChatGPT. So you can see various information regarding this ChatGPT, and also you can use their API. So if you click on this APIs, so you can start building your own applications using OpenAI's APIs. So I think there are also some charges for using these APIs. So what we will do is we'll go to the home page and click on this try ChatGPT. We can start typing. So first thing we will do is we'll start with Linux. So we'll start with asking it the command to find disk free or free disk space in Linux. So this is one of the basic commands in Linux. So it started to respond the command to find free disk space in Linux is df-h. Also you can pass some command line flags like -h to display it in human readable form. So that's pretty much the correct one. Let's also ask it to write a shell script. So let's try a shell script. So write a shell script to copy files across servers or across remote servers. So let's see what protocol it uses. So basically we can use SCP protocol, but let's see what ChatGPT responds with. So it is saying for copying across servers we can use SCP command. So it started creating some variables like source server and destination server because we asked it to copy across remote machine. So if you ask it to copy from your local machine to the remote machine, so in that case basically the command would be different. So here it is trying to copy a folder, so that's why scp-r. So the location of the folder in the source machine, and it is trying to copy in the destination. And if you ask it to copy from local to remote, maybe it will give you a different response. Write a shell script to copy file from local machine to a remote server, let's say. So in this case your machine will be local, so there won't be any source IP address requirement. So let's see what ChatGPT responds for that. So remote server, user at the rate of IP address or the DNS name, so the local file path and the remote directory, so where you want the file to be copied, and as you see SCP, the file name, and this is the remote server location. So this is pretty much the correct shell script. Now in all our DevOps sessions we talk extensively on Maven, and we often perform a small demo on how to deploy a war file to Tomcat server using Maven Tomcat plugin. So let's see whether ChatGPT actually gives me that response as well. So how to use Maven to deploy a war file to Tomcat. So basically this requires us to have the Tomcat 7 Maven plugin, that is input in the pom.xml file. Let's see whether ChatGPT actually gives us the right answer or not. So to deploy war file we need Tomcat 7 Maven plugin, that's correct, or Tomcat 8 plugin, and you need to put it in pom.xml file, that is also correct. So plugins goes into build section. Yes, that's the correct one because in the configuration if you see it is giving the Tomcat URL and the Tomcat server configuration that you need to put it in the settings.xml, and the path. So this is the context path on which you want to serve the application. And so once this is done, so you can use Tomcat 7 plugin and deploy goal to basically deploy your application if you're using Tomcat 7 plugin. So let's also ask it to write some Docker files. So let's say write a Docker file to Dockerize a GoLang application. So this requires us to copy the source into the container and then build it and generate the binary file. Of course we didn't ask it to use multi-stage builds to further reduce the size of the image. Let's see whether it does or not. So it is selecting the GoLang Alpine as the base image, copying everything, building the artifact would be main, that's a binary file, and as the CMD, which is the first instruction, so it is running that main file and it is exposing 8080. So this is the basic Docker file that it is not using the multi-stage builds. We can also ask it to basically write a multi-stage build Docker file, and once you have the Docker file you can use Docker build and tag your image and the context path, And once you're done, you can just run it using docker run, exposing it on -p. So if you need any environment variables, you can also pass it. So ChatGPT is also giving us all these options. So if you want to inject environment variables, you can also do that. And the other example that I wanted to test is on Docker Compose. So let's say if I have to deploy a GitLab or much lighter version of SCM tool called Gitia. Let's see whether ChatGPT actually does or not. So write a Docker Compose file to deploy Gitia, and I want Gitia to use Postgres. So write a Docker file to deploy Gitia with Postgres, because the backend would be Postgres. So here there will be two services, and the version it should use is version 3. That's the Docker Compose version. Let's see whether it writes two different services, one for Gitia and the other one for the Postgres. And Gitia should have the Postgres environment variable. So let's see whether it does that correctly or not. So Gitia image latest and the ports. Okay, user ID, group ID, DB type, Postgres, host, Postgres, name, Gitia, password is password. Okay, so I think we need to create DB with these configurations. So Postgres service is getting configured, configured with certain environment variables. So here the Postgres user is Gitia and password is password, DB is Gitia. So the same thing we need to pass as the environment variable to Gitia, so that Gitia can talk to the correct Postgres. And here the host is Postgres, because internal DNS resolution is available within Docker Compose version 3. So if you have to bring up the complete stack, you can use Docker Compose up. So this will basically bring down the applications. And also if you have any Docker file instructions, so you can use Docker Compose of -- build. Now let's test ChatGPT for some Kubernetes manifest file. Let's assume I have to run a pod and expose it as load balancer. Let's see what manifest file this ChatGPT writes. So write a Kubernetes manifest to deploy Nginx and expose it as load balancer with load balancer service, to be precise. So here is an example of Kubernetes manifest that can be used to deploy Nginx. So I think it is using kind as deployment, 3 replicas, setting proper selectors, labels on each pod, and exposing on 80. And you can see the service is of type load balancer. It is selecting the proper selector. Yes, that's pretty much correct. And let's also try try to see if ChatGPT can respond with some debugging steps. So let's say I have image pull back of error. This usually comes due to many issues. Let's see what would be the common reason. So how to debug image pull back of error. Of course it is from Kubernetes. So how to debug image pull back of error. So it says it usually occurs when cluster is unable to pull the image from the registry, and this could be due to many issues. So one, we need to verify the image and tag whether we are using proper image names or not, and check for authentication. That's true, because if they are put in the private registry, you need to put the image pull secrets, and check if image kubelet is working properly or not, and check whether connectivity is available or not. Okay, check if any proxy setup is needed, or if your cluster is behind a proxy. So we need to make sure that the requests are proxied through that proxy server. And you can also increase the backup time. So this is a new information. And also manually you can try using Docker pull to resolve any issues. So that's pretty much the correct answer. And let's also ask it to write some Jenkins file. Let's say I wanted to deploy a Helm chart to Kubernetes cluster using Jenkins file. So write a Jenkins file to deploy Helm chart to Kubernetes cluster. So basically it should take declarative Jenkins file. Let's see. So pipeline label, it is selecting a label, and stages, it is cloning your Helm chart from a Git repository and deploying it to Kubernetes. So initializing the client, adding the repository, and using Helm install. That's correct, but this is not the the complete Jenkins file. Of course, you need to test it and tweak it for any kind of the required parameters or required client tools. So you can see here, basically if you want to supply custom values, you can use -f, and the path to the kube config file has to be set because this Helm install requires access to the Kubernetes cluster. Even that should be there, and then you can run kubectl get pods within your pipeline to see the list of pods once your Helm chart is deployed. Of course, the answer is correct, but still you need to fine tune it to be able to use it with your actual pipelines. And so now what we'll do is we'll also ask you to write some Ansible playbooks. So write Ansible playbook to copy a folder to a remote server. Basically this should use the copy module of Ansible. Let's see. So Ansible playbook to copy a folder from local to remote. So gather facts now, tasks, copy folder. So it is basically using the synchronize module, source and the destination remote user, and the private key to connect to that remote server. So this is the response. And basically we can also ask it to run create some Terraform files. And this is how you execute your playbook. So it is also saying you can also use rsync module. It is still generating the response. So let's start to write another command. So write a Terraform file to create EC2 instance. Let's assume. So we can also ask it to create EC2 instance with SSH disabled, or to open some ports by default. So we can actually ask it anything. So here is an example of Terraform configuration file that is used to create an EC2 instance. So AWS is the provider, region it is selecting is US West 2, AMI ID, instance type T2 micro, and tags. So this is the Terraform configuration file. So it is saying you need to configure your AWS CLI, because without it you'll not be able to talk to your AWS instance. So basically you need to have your AWS access key and secret access key, and once you do AWS configure command, so these will be stored under these credentials. So it is not generating the full command. Let's try to ask it one more time, because it is not generating the proper Terraform command to actually run the Terraform script. So this time it is also giving the VPC security group IDs, subnet ID and all. Of course, if you need, you can also ask it to use certain subnets, certain DAGs, certain ports and all. So it is not giving us the final command, so that's fine. So let's move on to the next question. So what if I have to basically create a small API using Python? Write a sample API using let's say Python. So let's see what framework it selects. So I'm assuming it selects the Flask framework. So here is an example of a simple RESTful API using Python. Yeah, so it is also selecting the Flask framework because that's the most famous one. And it is creating a route slash, and it is responding with hello world and slash users. So this is a very basic API program. So that has one get and one post method. Yes, so let's also ask it to create the same thing using GoLang. So let's see what framework it selects. Write a sample API using GoLang, or let's say Go programming. And also if you see, it is also giving us the curl commands on how to test this certain API program. So let's see how to write a sample API using Go program. Let's see what API framework it selects. So it is using the HTTP library and Gin framework. So Gin is again the commonly used the REST library, and it also created the same slash endpoint and slash users. So one with the post and one with the get HTTP methods. So as you see, it is also giving us certain examples for Python and GoLang APIs. And also let's quickly ask it to some other questions on Docker. So I want to protect Docker daemon. So how to protect Docker daemon with TLS communication. With TLS. So this is the last question that I'm going to ask it. So this basically involves creating either the self-signed certificate or certificate signed by a known authority and configuring it in the daemon.json file, so that now the Docker daemon is basically protected through CLS. So here if you see, it is asking to first create a certificate authority. So you'll have the certificate and the key. So now what we can do is we can generate the server certificate and server key by signing them with the CA and putting them in the basically daemon.json. So this is CA cert and if you see TLS CA cert, TLS cert and TLS key, basically we put the certificate key of certificate of your CA and the certificates of the daemon in the daemon.json file. So this is how you protect Docker daemon. And also you can enable TLS for the Docker client since we didn't ask it, so it did not respond. So as you see, the ChatGPT can be used for almost all our common DevOps tasks, starting from Linux, shell scripting, Docker, Kubernetes, Jenkins, Terraform, Ansible. So it can do pretty much anything. So this usually greatly helps us in enhancing our productivity. So that's it for this video, and I'll see you in the next one.